Hello.
Oh, sorry. Hello. My volume is not up and I didn't hear it. Ding. There we go.
Got to get something on my wall back there. It's pretty empty.
I'm sure Elizabeth will find something.
Oh, we got to get some new art, but most of the art that was here is pretty ugly.
Yeah.
But, and they just did our carpet last Friday, so they took all the furniture out, did the carpet, put it all back in. They just sort of put stuff wherever.
Oh, okay.
But we're getting close.
Yeah. Good.
Quick
question before anybody hops on. I got an email from Janice Green, and she is officially joining the Strategic Growth Group. Before I send an invoice, I wanted to check on the dues for that group. Were you bumping it up?
Yeah, let's take it up to $349.
49? Okay. All right. Yeah. I just wanted to check before I send it out. Okay.
And I think that's what I know that's what I told the others. So yeah.
Okay.
Actually, that's one of the things I got to do. Well, I guess we can wait till November for the current members, but to send out to craft a dues increase notice.
Okay.
And send that out to everyone.
Okay. All right, then I will
grab my iced tea in a minute.
Oh.
I think we're good with everything else, right?
I think so. Yeah, sorry, I'm keeping an eye out for FedEx or UPS or however my computer's coming.
Oh.
I figured as soon as I get on is when they'll come. So
Yeah.
FedEx just drove by slowly. So I have a feeling we have the hardest time. FedEx, a couple times a year apart, has rescheduled and they can't find our house. And they're telling us the address is wrong. And I'm like, no, I'm sitting in my house at that address. But
you get mail every day.
Right. And it's just, no, you have a driver that's lazy, because there is Frankstown Road turns to Frankstown Avenue once it crosses into the city.
Oh.
So I think a lot of times they put in Frankstown, and then there's nothing at that address. Well, if you're in the wrong place, then yeah, there's no.
Hey guys.
Hey
Greg. How are you?
So we'll see if they come back. All right. There you go.
There he is. How are you?
Sorry, I was on another call.
Not a problem. How's everything in your part of the world?
It's good. It's really good. I switched from AT&T to Verizon yesterday, so I'm hoping, and I'm up in Truckee, so I'm hoping my internet connection is going to be far superior. We'll see.
Yep.
Well, we'll let you know if you disappear and go away. We'll know what's not better.
Okay.
Have you had challenges with AT&T?
Oh, horrendous.
Yeah.
I can't believe it took me this long to switch.
Yeah.
And I'm using a hotspot right now because internet's not great where I have my place, but night and day.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
I have Verizon.
I keep forgetting that Verizon still has landlines and internet. I always think about them for cell phones, but not for landlines.
Well, this is cell phone. This is cell phone.
For cell phone.
Oh, so you're using your cell phone for your hotspot.
Hotspot. Yes. Exactly.
And so have you put in like a permanent hotspot in your office?
No, just my phone.
Just your phone?
Literally my cell phone is my hotspot.
Okay.
That's what I
So-
use when I go to Panera or when I'm out.
Yeah.
I use my
Exactly.
hotspot instead of using public
Yeah,
anything.
sure.
So
Actually, Elizabeth was asking about that. She was getting some kind of promotion for a virtual private network, VPN.
okay.
And I don't know enough about that to know if it's worth setting it up to, we're traveling a lot and we're doing
Right.
internet in different places, but we're not doing anything really confidential. But I don't know how vulnerable we are to hackers and
I
viruses.
wasn't really doing much that I thought was confidential, and after I was at Panera I'm assuming it was Panera or a public Wi-Fi somewhere. Like it was my Kohl's credit card, but they found, and my Sam's one though. So it was like, I think once they figured out one password, they tried all,
Well, that's scary.
Oh,
you know.
yeah.
So I was able to get it pretty quick. But from now on, from that point on, I haven't used any public airports or anything.
So you were
On
using,
my computer.
like you were at Panera and you put your credit card in for something?
No, I think they just have, if you're on the public network.
Oh, and you put your password in to
Probably.
log into something.
Yep.
Stephen, a VPN, it's like $4 a month. It's dirt cheap.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you have one, Greg?
I've had one from time to time. I mean, I don't typically use a lot of public networks, but frankly, I don't see any reason not to. It's like,
Yeah.
so cheap.
Who did you do it through?
There are a ton of them. And I don't even know who's but they're all around $4 or $5 a month.
Yeah.
Very inexpensive.
I think if you look in the NSA Facebook group, somebody was talking about it
Oh, is that right?
recently.
Okay.
I can see if I can find it. Yeah, somebody I think was asking if it was worth it, and they may have gotten the same promotional stuff that Elizabeth did if it came
Yeah,
to the
that
mail.
very well could be. Although I think, we have, the identity protection thing, LifeLock.
Yep.
And they've partnered with somebody, Norton Security or somebody, and are offering a VPN.
Oh,
Yeah, a lot of times VPNs are integrated with security suites. So
yeah.
I
Well,
think AVG has one. Do you still use AVG?
Oh, okay.
I think they have one because they keep, every time they scan my computer, it pops up. Do you want to,
yeah,
upgrade to?
too.
Well, that's why I hate Norton, because they
Me too.
take over your computer and
Yeah.
can't
Try
get
to
it.
upsell me. Whoop, did I lose you?
We can hear you. Sometimes the video.
Okay.
Eric, you're back.
Yeah,
It's all
they're
good.
constantly nagging me.
Yep. Let me close this. Log in. Oh, of course. Waiting and sending a reminder. Okay. All right. I just got an email from Michael. He said he might be a few minutes late. So
Okay.
probably 15 minutes or so. But so let me think. So hi, Carrie. How are you?
Hey, Jill, doing great.
Good. You're on the phone too. Okay. I was just trying to see which number that was. I was gonna see. See if Dave hops on. Let's see. we where are we missing? Michael will be on. Toby, Frank.
Stephen, it'll be interesting to get your take on the ClearCare acquisition. I don't really know anything about it. Maybe, I'm not sure if you do, but.
Great question, Greg. And I don't know much. I know that WellSky, that is the company that bought them, also owns ADLware,
Oh, really?
which was bought
Yeah.
4 or 5 years ago by Kinzer.
Yep.
And we have a couple of clients that, in Mastermind members, that recently moved away from ADLware because it had gone downhill after that acquisition.
Right.
And so I have no idea what that means for ADLware. If it's anything like the HomeTrack acquisition, where ClearCare bought HomeTrack, and then eventually they quit supporting HomeTrack and just converted everybody over to ClearCare.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be a bit surprised if they do the same thing with those clients that are on ADLware.
Right.
I'm very concerned for our members. Are you on ClearCare, Greg?
I am, yes.
Yeah, I'm concerned for our members on ClearCare because of what I've seen happen with other acquisitions.
Yeah.
You know, when, of course, HomeTrack was bought by ClearCare and then that went away. But years ago, we had what we called our resource partners. And these were companies that we worked with closely, and we actively promoted them. And
Right.
we actually had a sponsorship program where we charged them a fee, an annual fee, to be part of our program. And we worked together and actively, not just endorsed them, but actively promoted their products. So we had Sonetto, which was owned by Stratus Business Systems.
Yep.
Down in Southeast Florida. And then they were bought by Matrix Care, which is a software company that wanted to really do what WellSky is doing, which was have software all across the post-acute care continuum.
Right.
And that acquisition lasted, I think, less than 2 years. And then Matrix Care was bought by, and I'm drawing a blank, a medical equipment manufacturer.
Sure.
And I have no idea what is happening now, except that everybody that I knew at Sonetto that stayed with Matrix Care is now gone.
Of course, yeah.
And I haven't heard anybody, there's a few of our members who are still on Sonetto
Yeah.
before the first acquisition, and they haven't changed. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah.
Then there was a small company that we worked with called AppointMate, and a young guy named Josh was the founder, and he was pretty astute and built a pretty good product. And then they were acquired by Delta Health Technologies up in Pennsylvania. And we continue to work with AppointMate, and we work closer with Delta. And then Delta had some kind of a major issue with a major customer. And I don't know the details, but they almost went under as a result of it.
Okay.
And they managed to survive, but they quit putting any support into AppointMate. And we had a couple users on AppointMate. They've all switched mostly to ClearCare. So I have no idea if AppointMate is still out there and what, if anything, they're doing.
Right.
So as a result of that, I'm nervous about what will happen to Clear Care.
Right.
And I presume Jeff Nutt is still there, but I don't know that for a fact. And how long he might stay around. And
Right.
the other key people that, helped him start it and grow it. So
Right.
It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah.
Hi, Toby. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Stephen?
Doing great. Good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
And hi, Carrie. I didn't get a chance to say hi.
Hey there, Stephen.
How are you
Hi, everyone.
today?
Doing great.
I'm just across the peninsula from you. I already had my ticket, so I decided I would come down to Naples anyway. So
Oh, good.
He needed a
Hope you have
break.
I did. I needed a little bit of kickback time and recovery from Mastermind month. We had 4 Mastermind meetings in 4 weeks, 2 in 1 week, and then a little respite, and then 2 in a row. And so I was ready for a little kickback, and I was out walking on the beach last night about 10 o'clock, and there was a beach party going on by the Ritz, and I took a picture of it. I said, this sort of reminds me that this is why we do what we do, because after working really hard for a while, we get to rest a little bit.
Yeah.
Be thankful for the industry that we're in and the difference we make, and so it's good to have a little kickback time. You said Michael's joining late. Did you hear from anybody else, Jill?
I haven't heard. I thought Dave would be on, but I haven't. I don't know. So
Okay. Well, we'll
go
try
ahead,
to
get going. And
catch up with everyone, and maybe we'll wait. We have a couple of agenda items, one of which is to talk about a winter-spring meeting time since we postponed this meeting. I think we'll wait and see if anybody else joins us, and at the end we can come back to that. But I was looking through the topics that people have been talking about and looking at what are the things that we're interested in. And one of the topics that several of you mentioned that you were interested in, and a topic that I'm very interested in because so many of our members are working on it, is the whole area of corporate culture. And I know that you all have bigger organizations and lots of people and lots of things going on. And so I suspect that this is a topic that is really important and relevant. So what I did was I just pulled together just a few slides from different slide decks that I have as we've been talking about culture. And what I thought I'd do is just take a few minutes and go through that and share some of the insights that we've picked up from other companies we're working with, and then ask you all some questions about the culture that you have in your companies, how you're crafting the culture, some of those kinds of things. So let me just share my screen here a moment. Did that come up correctly, Jill?
it did.
Okay. So as we have been talking a lot about crafting the culture, I do a flashback to August of 2015. And Elizabeth and I were vacationing in Cape May, New Jersey. We've gone to Cape May almost every year for 25 years. And this particular year, we were going to be there for 5 weeks. We had rented a little condo and we were working from there, much like we do from here in Naples. And so I sent an email out to all of my contacts in New Jersey and said, I'm going to be in your state for a month. If there's anything that I can do to help you, you want to have coffee, anything, I'll just let me know. And a number of people responded, and some came to visit me, and I went to visit a couple of people. But one of the delightful surprises was an email I got from Mark Biata, who's the CEO of Biata Home Healthcare. And I'll tell you a little bit more about Biata as we go along. But I've known Mark for 20 years, never done much work for his company, but we talk from time to time. And so in this particular Saturday morning, we met at Uncle Bill's Pancake House in Avalon, New Jersey, which if you're from the Jersey Shore, you know that Uncle Bill's is kind of a of a institution on these little beach communities up and down South Jersey shore. And so we sat down. It was Saturday morning. We're in shorts and tennis shoes and polo shirts. And when I sat down and we had coffee, and Mark handed me this card, and maybe you've seen it. It's a 4-fold plasticized card, the size of a business card, and it's called the Biata Way. And for the next 3 hours, Mark and I sat there talking about the Biata Way and the culture of the company. And he talked about the 3 core values: compassion, excellence, and reliability, and all that they were doing around those core values. And then he talked about his original vision. And he talked about how important it was to have a big vision. And I blow that up for you because it'll, as we come full circle, you'll see the significance of this. He says, we want to build and maintain a lasting legacy as the world's most compassionate and trusted team of home healthcare professionals. And so we talked about vision and values and mission and what they had done to craft the culture. And so in thinking about this and thinking about our discussion today, I go back to my core definition of culture as the way we do things around here. And that's a pretty simple definition, but the way we do things around here is influenced by 4 factors. Number 1 is the leadership style of the CEO. So that's y'all, and it's all your fault. Whatever culture you have, it's your fault or your credit, depending on how it's working out. The second are the core values of the company. The third is the behavior that you expect. And the fourth is the behavior that you permit. And the stronger the culture, the more clear people are about the behavior that you expect, and also the consequences for behavior that's outside of those expectations, or the behavior that you permit. And as we've really dug into this and studied values, the core beliefs that guide our thoughts and actions and our decisions, and one of the lessons I learned a number of years ago is the fact that you can really only have 3 core values, or maybe 4 at the most. And I hadn't really thought about it, and I had done a lot of work with values, and a lot of times I'd work with agencies and we'd come up with 5 or 6 or sometimes 7 core values. And I was speaking up in Vancouver, Canada, for a franchise company up there called Nurse Next Door. And I had talked to the founder and a couple of the other officers and really got to know the company and their culture. And then I went up and spoke at their annual conference. And then literally a week later, I was at the National Association for Home Care and Hospice. And the CEO was also at that conference speaking, and he was talking about their culture. And he said, you can only have 3 or 4 core values. The reason is that people can't remember 5. And he gave the audience a little test. He said, if you have 5 or more values, raise your hand, and a lot of people did. He said, I want you to turn to the person next to you and list off your 7 core values. And as he predicted, very few people could get past 4. And so he said, well, if people can't remember values 5, 6, and 7, then there's no point in having them. And I talked about this with Mark Biata, and he reaffirmed that. He said, we have 3 core values because I want people to remember them and know them intimately. And with 3, we're sure that we can do that. So I've actually gone back to a number of my clients and worked with them to reassess their core values. And if they have 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, is to really get them to step back and say, well, which of these 3 are most important to you and why, and to go back and do some role and value clarification. I love this quote from Edgar Schein. When I was a young manager right out of graduate school, I was working for a major manufacturing company in Northwest Pennsylvania, and I was eager and learning and studying, and I was reading all of the books on management and leadership, and I came across Dr. Edgar Schein. And so I had some latitude in terms of going to conferences and seminars, and so I signed up and went to several programs that he did around the country. and just was fascinated by his work around culture. And I love this quote that says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And while I do a lot of work in business strategy, and I think it's important, more and more I'm learning the importance and significance of focusing on the culture. And so we've been having these conversations with a lot of our mastermind members. And of course, actually in July of this year, and I'll tell you more about that, our 5% group went to New Jersey and spent a day with Mark and David Bayada at their global support center in Pensacola, New Jersey. And I'll tell you more about that in a moment. But based on all of these folks that we've been talking to, I sort of identified these 6 bullet points around crafting your culture. And the first one is to clarify your values and the behaviors you expect. And if you go to Bayada, BAYADA.com and click on the Bayada Way, they will show you, they'll walk you through their 3 core values, the definitions of their values, and actually the behaviors that go with those values. And they have 5 bullet points for each value, and they describe the behaviors that they expect. Next one is communicate your values and behaviors daily. And that's one of the things that we're seeing with all of these home care companies with strong cultures is that they weave their values into their daily communication. They start meetings with a conversation about one value and the behaviors that go with that. As a matter of fact, Mark said a lot of their weekly meetings in various divisions of their company focus on culture creating rather than performance improvement, which I thought was interesting. He said, we deal with performance one-on-one, we deal with culture in a group. And that goes back then to number 3, which is holding leaders accountable for living the values. And so if you have members of your leadership team who aren't living the values, who's holding them accountable? One that I'm seeing more and more of and is really important is using ritual and celebration to raise emotion. What we're realizing is that getting people enthused and excited about the company is really about tapping into their feelings and their emotion and using some ritual and using celebration. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. And then using visuals to reinforce the values. And I'll give you some specific examples of that. And then the last one, and maybe the most important, is hire for culture fit first. And about 4 or 5 years ago, we started realizing the importance of this and actually developed a tool that we call the Culture Fit Interview. And it's basically a little interview check sheet that you take each of your core values and you look at the behaviors, and then you craft some interview questions, behavioral interview questions. So you're getting the applicant to tell you what the value means to them and to give you examples of how that value is important to them and what they would do in certain situations. And so doing a culture fit interview. So as we talk about ritual and celebration and visuals, a couple of examples that I think illustrate this. I have a client I'm working with right now, fairly large company, do about 18,000 hours a week. And the company was founded by a gentleman who had been taking care of or was actively involved in the care of his father-in-law. And the father-in-law's name is Roger. And so when they started the company, they used Roger as the example and the metaphor. And their mantra is always see things through Roger's eyes. And so as we're working with them on crafting the culture, they're doing a number of things. They're creating a culture card similar to the Bayada card, the Bayada Way card. They're creating some visuals for their offices. But one of the things they did, what I thought was very cool, is they created the Roger Award. And it's a pin with Roger's picture on it. And it says, seeing things through Roger's eyes. And about a month ago, they held their first pinning ceremony. And they gathered all of their office team. I think they have 11 offices. They gathered all of their office team together. And over in the right-hand corner, you see in the corner of their office, there's a chair and a picture of Roger on the wall. And the chair was Roger's chair. And they used it as part of the symbolism. And so for this pinning ceremony, they brought the chair out, and the CEO and founder called up the chief operating officer. And she sat in the chair, and he pinned her with the Roger Award pin and told the Roger story. And then she brought up the next person and the next person, and they had 45 people or so, and each person came up and sat in the chair and received the pin from the previous person. And they caught it on videotape, and they got pictures of it, and they made a big hoorah of this celebration around the Roger story. Another example is one of our mastermind members is called Wilson Care Group out in Honolulu, Hawaii, and Shelley Wilson is the founder and CEO, and we were out there for a mastermind meeting a year ago, April, and I captured this photograph of this, what we call their pledge. It happened to be on the wall of their office, and again, this is a visual example of how people live the values that they have articulated. Here's Bayada, and one of the things that came out of Bayada, our visit there, is how much they do visually. And this is in their Global Support Center in Pensacola, New Jersey. And a couple of things. In the upper left, you'll see that there's a conference room, and it's called the Compassion Room. And they have 3 core values: compassion, excellence, and reliability. And they have 3 rooms in this hallway, and each room is named after one of the core values. Another part of their theme is we love what we do. And so in the hallway outside of these conference rooms, you have these giant letters spelling out, we love what we do. And then on the right, there's a whole curved sort of an S-shaped wall that shows the history of the company from when it was founded in 1975 until when Mark turned over the keys to the company to his son in 1990 or in 2015. And so they're really doing a lot to visualize the core values. Now I take you back to the vision that was talked about creating a lasting legacy. A year after our first meeting, Mark and I had breakfast again at Uncle Bill's Pancake House in Avalon, and we were sort of catching up on the year. And he said to me, I've got this idea, and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do it. Hey, Michael, welcome.
Hi, guys. Thanks.
Good to see you. We're talking about corporate culture. And Mark said, I'm not sure quite what to do about this, but he said, I'm thinking about starting a 501c3 corporation and taking Bayada not-for-profit. Now, at that time, Bayada was doing $1.5 billion in revenue. That's billion with a B. And having worked with lots of large not-for-profits, I was curious, but I wasn't quite sure what that meant and what was going to happen. But we talked about it, and he was sort of at the exploratory stages at that point. We had a nice conversation. Flash forward a year later to August of 2017, and I called him up to see about having breakfast because I was going to be in Philadelphia. He said, well, I'm not going to be in Avalon. I'm going to be in my office in New Jersey. Come on over and we'll have breakfast. Little did I know, and he didn't tell me ahead of time, that that day, August the 17th, was his 70th birthday. And he was turning the keys to the company over to his son, David, and they were moving forward with the transition from one generation to the next. And as we walked back to his office after breakfast, there were television crews and news photographers and a big party going on in the office. And I happened to get caught right in the middle of it, which was kind of fun and interesting. I felt like an interloper because I hadn't been invited ahead of time. But Mark said, no, I want you to come and be part of this. And we had a great visit. So flash forward to July 24th, 2019. And we are visiting their Global Support Center. There in the photo on the left, you see my wife and business partner, Elizabeth, getting a book signed by Mark, and next to him is his son, David. And in case you missed the news of this, in December of 2018, actually they announced it a little earlier than that, but in December they made the transition, and on January 1st, 2019, Biata became a not-for-profit 501c3 entity. And we're there in July of this year, and Mark and David are telling us the story. And back in 2017, when Mark and I were having breakfast, and or 2016, he was telling me about his idea, and I didn't understand it. And he said, remember, my vision was to create a lasting legacy, and I wanted to have a company that would last for 100 years. And in exploring long-lasting companies, I looked at publicly traded companies, and there are very few that have lasted 100 years, and most of them look very different because they've been bought and sold and new management and whatever. He said, I looked at family-owned businesses, and he said there are very few that are 100 years old because most of them don't make it through the third generation of family succession. And he said, I looked around and realized that there are many not-for-profit organizations, and he specifically named the University of Pennsylvania Hospital, Jefferson Hospital, and right there in Philadelphia is the Visiting Nurse Association, VNA, which is 120 some years old. And so he said, I decided that I was going to turn it into a not-for-profit. So he said, I went to my children and said, here's what I'm thinking about. And basically, I'm going to be giving away your inheritance, and I'm going to take care of you. And he had accumulated net worth by being the owner of a $1.5 billion company. And so he made arrangements to leave a legacy with his children, but then they turned Biata into a not-for-profit. And it's a fascinating story. The other part of the story is that in November of 2018, toward the end of the year, we talked about celebration and rewarding people for building the culture. They had their annual Leadership Awards banquet in Philadelphia, and they brought about 3,000 people from all over the country into this big banquet. And they gave out awards like they typically do. And then at the end of the banquet, before they all went home, Mark went up on the stage and said, there's just one more thing. He said, as you know, in January, we're going to turn Biata into a not-for-profit organization. And so I want to thank all of you for helping me to grow this business and create the culture. And I have a bonus for everyone. And he gave everyone in the company a bonus. About $20 million was given away that night and divided up based on some formula that he had created. And it was just an amazing event to culminate all of this conversation about how they have crafted the culture and what it meant to leave a lasting legacy. And so my question for each of you is, what will your legacy be? And perhaps more important, what is your culture? How did you craft your culture? And how are you implementing your culture in your organization? So I'd love to hear from each of you, and let's take a moment and just tell me what your thoughts are about this and what it means to you and how you're building your culture. And I'm going to start with a volunteer on my left, Carrie, because we talked about VNAs being 100 years old. I don't know how long your VNA's been there, but tell us a little bit about the culture there and the kinds of things you're doing. And I know that your business is part of the bigger VNA, so tell us a little bit about that.
Good. So our VNA has been here for 42 years, founded by Mrs. Crow, and we're into our third generation of Crows as CEO. So our CEO is Jennifer Crow, amazing, just absolutely fantastic CEO. This last year, we've started about 2 years now, EOS, and so Walt, who comes in and works with us on our EOS team and comes in every quarter, helped us work on what our culture is. We made a list of our top 20, 25, 30 people in the corporation. And then from there, we took that list and we made a list of all the things they do that are fantastic. Why are these the best people for your company? And then we called it down to basically 4 core values: motivating, excellence, service-driven, and committed. And like you say, you can't just say those 4 words and then expect them to be how everybody behaves. So we've been pushing that out in a variety of ways. Every office and several rooms in every office has posters with those 4 core values. We created questions at interview that we ask, open-ended questions that get to the heart of our core values. We don't hire people that don't meet our core values. We basically hire and fire both based on core values. We have a set of expectations for behaviors. If people are outside of that line of core values, they can't stay here. It just doesn't work. We are a nonprofit, but it doesn't mean we are a very strong business. And, when you talk motivating is different than motivated. We want to work around people who are motivating us. And that's what we talk about, are those kind of people that shine. And excellence, we don't talk numbers here. We talk numbers every week at our meetings, but excellence, service-driven, and committed. You can't ask for a better group of employees. And we use the language all the time. And in the beginning, it felt a little corn doggy, and by now it doesn't anymore. We're just so used to it. And it's made a difference. And when you say it eats strategy for breakfast, it's absolutely right.
Very good.
Good.
And so you've built an amazing private pay business within the umbrella of VNA. How has the culture helped you grow your business?
Well, that's a great question. So when I came here, we were 3% of overall revenue. Private duty was little. We had 35 patients. And today, the Medicare side is only 25% of our revenue. And thank God for that. As we go into PDGM, we really feel like we'll be safe and ready to get through PDGM safely. One of the things that I do all the time is I partner with those nursing supervisors on the Medicare side. I try to train nurses who will do both sides of the house, or cultivate at least a group of people that will do that. Sales reps, the same thing. We just did our conference where we're really pushing out that our sales reps need to do both private and Medicare. You can't just do one or the other. You need to see the patient more holistically. We added care management, which really helps pull together those more acutely ill patients with the paraprofessional services. And it's talking all the time. It's relationship building within my own company. When I first came here, I used to say I'm going to hunker down and let the bullets fly, because we were the lowest man on the totem pole, and they made sure I knew it all the time. I spent a lot of time just being very quiet and quietly building this business, and then all of a sudden we got sort of too big to ignore, and that's been the last few years.
You mentioned you were 3% of revenue. What percent of revenue are you now?
So my division by itself is, I believe, 65% of the business right now.
Wow, that's fast.
So yeah.
So you just did a flip-flop from home health
to
private pay to...
Yeah, we really shifted it, and thank God, because PDGM is, this whole change in reimbursement, and we won't know until we're really in the thick of it, but we're hearing some people say when we do some of our computer modeling that we'll take a 12% hit in revenue. Wow. I really think it's going to be way more than that.
Yeah. And I've heard people say that as many as 40% of the agencies in the country could go out of business, could be worse than 1997.
6,000. Yeah, we think 6,000 companies will go out of business.
Wow, out of 12, so that's 50%. Yeah, very interesting, very interesting. Well, let's keep going around the room, and in the middle of my screen is Toby. Tell us about your company and your culture, Toby, and the things you're doing to build the culture.
Sure. Well, I'm with Helping Hands. Just to refresh everyone's memory, we do about 11 million in sales, about 34,000 hours, 35,000 hours a month. Have 12 offices, 10 offices actually, 2 satellites that we operate out of, and about 37 admin people and about 500 or maybe 450 caregivers. But we haven't actually, we've grown tremendously fast, and it's been primarily through branching. And because of that, we focused on other areas. And so we have no real formalized process of crafting or developing or launching and disseminating information about our corporate culture, because it's really not defined. But if I had to define it, it would be probably autonomy, inclusivity and open communication or collaboration, and compassion. So I guess through my hiring practices, because I'm a pretty caring person, that's one of the reasons I started the company, I try to convey that to management. And as I think you said in your slide, Stephen, you hire for culture first or culture fit first, and I've kind of done that, but I haven't done it for any other reason than I like people who share my values. And so I often ask questions like, what is your management style? What do you think about second chances? I had an opportunity, and I've learned a lot over the last 8 years since I started the company about hiring. I had a situation with one of my top performing offices in Tigard, which is on the west side of the Portland metropolitan area, where we needed a branch manager. We had one that was moving to Seattle because her husband got a high-end job at Amazon, and we needed to replace her. It was in a really, like I said, rich environment for growth and on a trajectory that we didn't want to see dissipate. So we looked at probably 5 people. One was a dynamic woman who had a heavy sales culture background. She came in and really sold us. And the other one I really liked. His name's Bailey. And they both had experience in in-home care. One was, like I said, sales-driven. The other one was a really soft-spoken, compassionate fella who I really liked. But, boy, the other lady really sold me. I hired her. She came in like a bull in a china shop, and within a month, there would have been an exodus of everyone in that office who I really value leaving because of her personality and her expectations. And I tried to convey that to her, and it didn't work, and it was mutual, and she left, and I reached back out to Bailey, who I had a really good gut instinct about because he shared that culture. I thought he was a culture fit. He shared that compassionate piece, and it was what we needed. He was available. I brought him on, and we have seen that office double in sales in 1 year. It's been incredible, and he is exactly what we need, and staff there love him, and there's a great synergy, and everything's great. We do have a little bit of difficulty engaging, or I should say pollinating, the other offices because we are spread out all throughout Oregon with that kind of pseudo-corporate culture. It's not formalized. I'm getting a lot of ideas here through this discussion, which is what it's all about. That's great. I'm thinking of a poster right now that is consistent, maybe on foam board that we put in every single office. But I guess that's also the beauty is having the offices have that autonomy, which is one of the things I encourage, allows the branch managers and administrators the ability to create their own team dynamics within their given unique makeup and team, with the different personalities. So they steer that based on their goals and the guiding principles that they've learned from me. But it is a little bit different everywhere, and so we have not done a great job with really defining that corporate culture. I did write down we do have a mission statement, of course. The mission statement is to enhance the quality of life of our clients by delivering compassionate, world-class care. And it wasn't about a year after I developed that I came up with, you know what, we've got to take care of our staff. So we need a staff vision. And that one tied back into the mission statement, but the staff vision is to hire and train exceptional people who feel respected, empowered, and driven to fulfill our mission of delivering world-class care. So the compassion and respect piece, excellence, of course, those are all things that I'm going to have to think about. I come from the corporate world. I was vice president of marketing for a credit union for many years in my youth, and we had a very strong culture within the credit union, as most credit unions do. We feel like we're a little bit different from banks. So those are some things that have been on my radar, but due to the growth, just have not allowed me to implement in a formalized manner. I did just have our work session, our strategic planning session with my business partner, to plan for our corporate work session, which is going to follow the Oregon Healthcare Association conference coming up in November. And we will be launching some of those values and sharing the core values of our company, and hopefully putting something together before then to help formalize it, disseminate it, and have it be a part of our culture.
Very good. Well, it sounds like you've intuitively crafted a culture based on your personal values. And I think that's right on target, because so often I see that the values of the company begin with the values of the founder, and you influence what those values are. And it sounds like you're doing a really great job. As you said, less formally than some others, but got lots of good folks. And
yeah, we do. We really have to define it. For now, I call it trickle down values.
Okay, all right.
And that's what's kind of happening organically, and it's nice to see, because I'll see in hiring practices, or when I go out and visit an office that I haven't in a while and they've hired someone new, that has really crossed over into the new staff member. So there are some good things coming, but there's some work to be done as well.
Very good. Well, thanks, Dopey. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Michael, tell me about the culture at Jev's and at your part of the business.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you use Beata as an example, because I worked there almost the past 7 years. And I actually left the Friday before that announcement happened.
Oh, is that right?
So I learned a lot, though, from Mark and David, and like that. If I learned anything at Beata, it was all about culture. It's amazing to get that many people to respect the vision of somebody that started something. It's pretty special to experience, and you could feel it when you walk into that building.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's one of the things. When I took the role at Jeb's, I was walking into a situation where there was a nonprofit company that just happened to do home care for the past 6 years. And when I started, it was a pretty big book of business. They were doing, almost 40 million, but they were running it in a nonprofit fashion, not in a home care fashion. So, not only was the turnaround of that challenging, because you have a different mindset, you have different expectations that the people have been working under for a period of time. And then I'm coming in saying, not only do we have to not change everything, but like there's a lot that has to change. And we have to do it faster, we have to do it better, and we have to grow, which it was really overwhelming to the team. But I think the one thing that helped me is everything I learned at Beata, make it about the people. And if you make it about the people and you listen, that they're going to have a say in how this goes and when it happens. And once you get momentum behind that, it really starts to take off. And it's going to be a year in November. So I've been here about 11 months, but we are seeing a change, and we are seeing some growth at this point, which wasn't consistent in the past. We set up a couple different things. So, and I took, again, a lot what I learned at Beata, and one of the things was we have pillar metrics. And the pillar metrics, it starts with people, service, quality. And if we focus on those things, the finance and the growth will happen. So we're really trying to put our efforts, and my vision is make it about the people. So like the employees first. If the employees feel supported, like how do you create an extension where your field staff feel like they're a part of something bigger than their day to day? And I think that's one of the challenges, a lot of non-medicals have, is we're just another agency to them. And, we just provide the paycheck and that's it. And I don't want that as we continue to grow and expand. So we came up with there's 10 expectations. So we have like the pillar metrics are like our operational metrics. I have this, I know you can't really see it, but there's top 10 expectations that we post in everybody's pod, and it's part of their onboarding process. And we do this thing called a looper when somebody starts, where the executive team meets with the new people first. And we talk about the top 10 expectations. We don't talk about anything else on the pillar metrics. It's all about behaviorally how we want the organization to go and what they can expect from leadership on how we're going to drive the business. And it's all about like teamwork, sense of urgency, just saying yes, meaning like we may not be the one that helps you, but we will get you to the right place. So yes, we can help. And there's a bunch of other stuff around like goal setting and being accountable and stuff like that. So that's the introduction that everybody gets to the organization. A lot of the times we have to coach people or write people up. It's because of behaviors. It's not because of them not meeting goals. It's the actions that are taken or not taken in order to get to the goal. So we're kind of using that as like a lead measure, a day to day, and then the lag is the pillar metrics. What we're working on, like I'm putting a strategic plan together for the next 3 years. We're working on I'm breaking it up into people, process, and growth. So it's going to go heavy the next year around people. So like how can we're starting to create more specific trainings to give caregivers a career opportunity. The more trainings they get involved with, the more money they can make. And we're talking about better perks. Like, is there a way to offer better benefits for people that not only want to upskill themselves, but also have retention within the organization, and they can be rewarded in different ways. With that, there's also some internal things that we're trying to do. Like we don't have a 401k, and we're definitely large enough that we should. So, we're trying to figure out ways to, find the dollars to do that. So I don't want it to be all about like, you have to be robotic and do things this way. It's more of like, tell me what you guys want and what you need. And as long as you can bring your A game around the expectations, the money will be there for us to give it back to you. And as a nonprofit, we will have the opportunity to give back. So that I think that, that's still new to everybody. Like the first 6 months, I was really just trying to get some people in the right seats. Yeah. We're getting a lot better there. Now we're really driving the culture piece. And I think over the next, year, they're really going to feel the people part of the strategic plan come into life. And then, process and growth. Process is going to continue to change, and we got to get more efficient. And but if we just treat people the right way and make it about the people and not about us, I think the growth is always going to happen.
Yeah. And I loved when we were talking with Mark and David about growth and their expectation of slow, steady growth across the organization, and their whole concept about managing, the language better than I. They were talking about managing the case, or the case management process, I guess, of how you take a client in and manage their whole experience, and what it takes to do that at the local level, at the office level. I thought that was fascinating how they use that to drive growth. Yeah,
they use the phrase of like one client, one shift, 1 hour at a time. And if you really break it down, I just met with a potential client who's actually going to switch agencies to us after my conversation. And he said something to me that, it just goes right back to that Bayada message. He's like, this is my life. And I don't think, businesses look at it like that. It's just another client. Yeah. It's more revenue. It's 56 hours a week, this case, but he's like, this is my life. This is a big decision to me. And I think like that's the core of what we do. And we have to make sure everybody feels that. Right. Very good. All right. Well, thanks, Michael. Appreciate that. Greg, tell us a little bit about your company and the culture there and what the kinds of things you're doing to craft the culture.
Great. So thank you, Stephen. So, I've got a lot of initiatives around this, and I heard a saying once that, your brand isn't what you think it is, it's what your clients say it is. And I think, company cultures are very similar. Did I freeze here? Of course, my internet connection is bad when I start to talk. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Just keep going. Sometimes the picture freezes, but we can still hear you okay.
Great. So one thing I need to do is get feedback from my employees to see if we're actually moving in that direction of actually building the culture that I'm trying to build. And so, I started basically, this is really about three months ago. And we decided that our mission as a company wasn't really what we do, but why we do it. And the goal, really, our mission is to significantly improve the daily lives of our clients and provide peace of mind to their loved ones. And that's a pretty simple measure because, you have before and after, before we got involved and after we got involved. And I use the word significantly because I want to be aspirational and have our teams actually shoot high. So we actually change these people's lives. And again, I have yet to measure this with clients, but we've moved in that direction, and I think it's actually starting to take place. And then I also elevated our caregivers in our mission to improve their lives through growth, learning, and meaningful work, because I felt like that goes with all of our employees, but caregivers are a unique breed. It's a thankless job. They don't get paid a lot, and I think that they've got unique challenges in their life that I want to focus on in order to achieve our mission. And so I actually elevated them to the same level as my clients. And so our core values are really, we've got 5. I tried to keep them easy to remember, but our first one is people first. And I thought about that, and I didn't want it just to be this kind of throwaway line. And I said, well, really, what does that mean? And I realized that I wasn't sure we were giving them the expectations we had of them, the guidance and the training and the structure and the support. It's one thing to have an expectation, but it's another thing to put things in place to help them achieve that expectation. And I think we weren't really doing that. So I went through this process of making sure that structurally we are doing everything in a consistent manner to make sure that we do everything we can to embody that people first. And when we have a hard decision as to whether we're going to keep a client, for instance, and the client is very valuable and we make a lot of money, but they abuse our schedulers or they abuse our caregivers, keeping that client wouldn't be embodying people first. And so we've got to be willing to, for example, fire clients and have those hard conversations, because we don't, then we're not really embodying the people first value that we say we have. The second one is performance. I do think that I want my people to realize we are a performance-based company and we meet our commitments. And so I really feel like that has to be part of our culture. The third is actually problem solving, and this is a new one for us. I feel like there's a ton of obstacles in our industry that make it difficult as to how we perform, and they're not going to change, right? Caregivers not showing up on time, not showing up at all, showing up in a t-shirt or blue jeans. I mean, these things you can talk to your blue in the face, but if we don't put things in place to help mitigate those chances of those things happening, then we're never going to solve those problems. So I've made actually a problem-solving template for my team that kind of structurally goes through the identification of actually what the problem is, and more importantly, what the cause of that problem is before we jump to the solution. And I want to ingrain that in my people to think that way, because at the end of the day, that's generally what a service business is solving clients' problems. And the last 2 that we have are teamwork and trust. I felt like teamwork is an important one. It kind of goes without saying, but the essence of teamwork really is everybody having a common goal. In any sport, it's obviously winning the game. And I don't think we've included our caregivers as much. It's kind of a little bit of a we and them. You've got management and you've got your caregivers. And this kind of ties into my last one, which is trust. I'm not sure that there's a good trust between our managers and our caregivers. And I want to make sure that in order to facilitate that teamwork, that we include them in this problem solving and make them feel like they're part of the team truly, but they've got to trust us first. And so, Stephen, to your slide before, I think you absolutely have to talk about these things every day, because what most companies do is they write them down and they put them on the wall, and nobody really knows what they are. Right. So we start every meeting by putting somebody on the spot and asking them to say, okay, in this past week, give me an example of how you met our mission and what core values you demonstrated. And it's great because it makes people think about it ahead of time when they get into the meeting, puts them on the spot, but it means we're continually reinforcing that. So it's a work in progress. I'd like to say this is our culture now. I think it's going to literally take multiple years for this to take place, because we all have this problem of a remote workforce that we don't see every day, and communication is very difficult. So, but if anybody has any ideas on caregiver surveys and how they've successfully implemented those, I'd love any feedback you have on that.
Are you talking about caregiver satisfaction surveys, Greg?
Yeah, satisfaction, engagement, are we living up, somehow asking the question consistently, do you trust us? Do you, and I know there's that company that does it, but frankly, it's not inexpensive. And I have a feeling I could probably maybe do it on my own and not have to spend that much money. And my question is less about how to do it, because there's the survey monkeys of the world, but doing surveys the right way is important, and there's definitely a way to do it and to measure it on Likert scales and these various things. So if anybody's done that successfully, I would love to know a little more about it.
Well, of course, you mentioned the product that's available. Home Care Pulse does client satisfaction and caregiver satisfaction. Right. One of our members out in San Diego, Southern California, I guess they're in Orange County, uses a local, it's actually the guy who's the executive coach for the owner, and he has a business partner, and they use the Gallup Q12, which I've looked at. I really like the Gallup Q12. I could just never get licensed to use it. But it's after all the research that Gallup has done, they came up with 12 core questions that measure employee engagement. Okay. And they've demonstrated statistically and through their research that these are the 12 questions that really give you the data about your level of client or caregiver engagement or employee engagement. So look up Gallup Q12. There's some others out there. I don't know of anyone right now who's doing their own consistently. Yeah. People have done a one-off survey. As you said, part of the value of the survey methodology is not only to get the baseline data, but then to measure improvement over time. Yeah. With multiple elements. So like the Home Care Pulse caregiver survey, I think has 12 elements, and they do interviews every month. I think you do 10% of your caregivers every month, and then they give you a report so you can see how you're doing in each of those 12 elements, and then you can focus on the areas where the scores aren't so good. And they're also giving you specific feedback about what caregivers said, and they get the permission of the caregiver, and then they can identify the caregiver so that you can follow up and ask them specifically, what's going on here? How can we make this better? So there's some good information. Right. Very good.
And to me, Stephen, I think it's a lot of the little things, right? It takes an effort. It isn't just throwing money at this thing. That's right. It literally is a dozen little things that have to be done consistently over time, and they have to be genuine and timely. And so that's what makes it hard about doing this, is it takes actually quite a bit of an effort.
Yep, sure does. Okay. Well, very good. Well, great conversation. We'll continue to talk about culture and the things that we do to grow our people and our processes. And I love that element of what you're talking about there with people and processes. And then we will keep going forward. One of the questions that we want to address is when and where to think about our first face-to-face gathering. We were planning to meet this week in Florida. A couple of folks couldn't make it because of previous schedules. A couple of other folks were concerned about the size of the group, if there were only going to be 4 or 5 people. And so I guess my first question is, how many folks do you feel like we need to have a commitment from in order to make it worthwhile to schedule a face-to-face meeting?
Stephen, this is Carrie.
Uh-huh.
Having done, groups in the past, I really feel like at least 8 companies.
Okay.
So more people, but I think if you don't have that many ideas, it's such a great opportunity for us all to spend time together. But to be together for a day and a half, you really need a lot of, input from a lot of different people. That's my opinion.
Okay. Other thoughts about that? Is that number 8? How does that resonate with you? Is that?
Yeah. I didn't have any, anything to base it on, but 8 was the number that came to my mind.
Okay.
Glad you backed it, Gary.
Okay. Now, Carrie, you said 8 people and then 8 companies. Let me ask you this. How many of you plan to bring another key person with you when we have our face-to-face meeting?
So just to clarify, I think I said 8 companies, and it could be more people.
I might.
And the reason I differentiate that is that even if there's multiple people from the same company, it's still those same core ideas.
Yes.
And good.
Okay. Well, and I asked the question about how many of you expect to bring someone, because what we have seen in the other groups, all of the groups, but particularly the larger groups, is that most of the members bring 2 people to their events. It's a CEO, COO, we have a father-son team, we have several husband and wife teams. And what I've seen is that when there are at least 2 people from the organization there, then you have the opportunity to have conversation during the meeting about topics that are being discussed. You have the opportunity when you go back to go through your notes and to-dos and have some conversation. And also, it really helps with implementation. And we've gotten some real clear feedback from many of our members that the folks back home appreciate when there are 2 of them who've been to the meeting. So it's not just, well, the boss went to a meeting and came back with 12 new ideas and he can't understand why we can't make them all happen at once, or she can't make them, and so I would encourage you to think about that. And so obviously that's going to grow the size of the group. But what I'm hearing you saying is you want to have 8 companies committed before we actually have a face-to-face meeting. Is that right? Okay. And let me just take a quick look at my list here. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6. Right now, we have 7 companies who have expressed an interest in participating. And we have 1, 2, 3 who have said, yes, I'm interested, but for whatever reason couldn't participate this fall. And then we've got some other people who have, we've had conversations with. So there's probably, well, for sure 10 companies that could be members. And so I guess what makes the most sense is for us to get as many of those people onto these monthly video calls to meet the group, to see the value of it, and then to be willing to make a commitment to join the group. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Who else do you know that is not a competitor of yours but has a similar size organization who you think might be a good fit now that we've met a couple of times by video?
Steve and I have one company, and I've asked him about it, and I'll circle back to him.
Okay.
He's actually quite large. He's like 20 million, but I will circle back to him.
Okay.
Stephen, do you leave that up to us to determine whether or not they're a competitor, or they're different regions? The reason I ask is because there is someone north of me in Washington in the Seattle area that isn't a competitor now, but depending on his strategy, and growth goals, he may move south into Oregon. I may move north. It's doubtful, but how do you? What are the criteria around geographic areas and competition?
Well, that's a great question, and it's getting more difficult to avoid competition, but basically what we have said is that, yes, each member defines their geographic service area, and then we don't permit anyone else to join the group who serves that same service area. And then we created a new policy last spring when we had two members in a group, and one member was expanding geographically, expanded into the service area of another member. We were figuring out how to deal with that, and then as it turned out, we had the opportunity to form a new group. And so Carrie is with us because somebody had moved into her territory, but she felt like this was a good fit for her. And so that short-term problem went away. But what we did was write basically a non-compete policy that says that if a member of the group expands into the territory of another member of the group, then the group doing the expansion is going to be asked to leave the group. And we actually had that happen this fall with our top 5% group. One of the members acquired a business in the territory of another member. And since we already had the policy developed, we executed that policy. And I sent him a note and sent him the policy, and then I talked to him by the phone. And he understood, didn't necessarily agree, but he understood what we were doing and why we were doing it. And so he gracefully, and we're still friends, but he gracefully backed out of the group. So that's the approach we've taken. And so far, that's working. One of the interesting things that popped up as a result of the top 5% group was several people saying, well, I don't think it's that big a deal. And so we have sort of differing viewpoints within that group. And so one possibility, and I'm still sort of thinking this through and figuring it out, is that we may have an opportunity for a group of very large companies that do in fact compete with one another, but that would come together to talk about industry issues that aren't specific to their territory. So I'm not sure how that'll shake out, but it is something that we're dealing with, particularly with larger companies and those who are growing through expansion and acquisition.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple then in that case.
Okay, very good. Yeah, if you have any names of folks, touch base, see if they might be interested. If so, let me know. I'll have a conversation with them and let them know the details of the group and how it works. And when we get to 8 folks, we will find a time and a place to meet. Does that work for everybody?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll meet again in a month on November the 20th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And I'll take some of the other topics that you gave us and we'll build the agenda. And then if there's anything that we can do for you in the meantime with any of this, let me know. Michael just sent me a note that he had to hop off. He had another meeting. But thank you all for being here today. And we will continue to reach out to the other folks who have expressed an interest, and we'll see how quickly we can get to 8 companies.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, take
Have
care.
a great day. Talk to you soon.
Bye, everybody.